With the agriculture and industrial revolution, a transport revolution happened. This transport revolution was necessary because the factories needed raw materials and at the same time markets needed the manufacturers created in these factories. So this transport revolution will provide both of them what they need. Roads and canals were built since 1770 and river transport, of course, widely used. Thanks to the steam engine, Robert Fulton created the first line of commercial steamboats. Before Fulton, water navigation used boats powered by wind or animals, but they were very fast. They were replaced by these steamboats. Anyway, clipper ships continued sailing seas, and they were definitely replaced when the British Empire guaranteed the existence of harbors with supplies of coal for the long routes between Britain and colonies in America, Africa, and Asia. The other field where the steam engine was used was the ground transport. Railway was invented thanks to the steam engine powering locomotives and the iron used to build trains and railways. George Stephenson invented the first steam-powered locomotive in 1814 to transport coal. In 1825, the first cargo railway line was built, and 5 years later, the first public transport railway line between Liverpool and Manchester. The railway became one of the most revolutionary ways of transport because it made possible to get goods to their markets in a cheap, safe, and efficient way. The railway had a great impact on industrialization because it needed coal for working, so it promoted mining, and it needed iron to build railways and trains. So it promoted the iron industry too. This new way of transport was so important that spread very fast through the entire world. Spain's first line of railway transport was built between La Habana and Güemes in 1837. In the Iberian Peninsula, the first line was Barcelona-Mataró in 1848. Long-distance railways were built, such as the Trans-Siberian Railway connecting Moscow and Vladivostok, 9,288 kilometers, or the Southern Pacific Railroad in the United States, 21,739 kilometers. Imagine these travels at the usual speed gathered at the 19th century, more or less 60 kilometers per hour. And then you must travel 10,000 kilometers without air conditioning nor heating. Social and economic impact of the transport revolution. Trade. The transport revolution reduced times and costs, so the trade was highly improved and people traveled easier. Specialization. Thanks to the transport, the industrialized countries made and exported manufactures, whereas the colonies provided raw materials for industrialized countries. Mining and iron industry. Coal, iron, and other metals were needed to power the locomotives and to build railways, trains, and steamboats. Daily life. Great amounts of people started migrating thanks to the easier and faster ways provided by long-distance trains and steamboats. At the same time, food was transported longer distances, and that meant an improvement in people's nutrition. The 19th century was a time of population's growth. European people became from 200 million people in 1800, they became 400 million people in 1900. They doubled their population in just 100 years. Causes for this population growth were the decreasing death rate and the high birth rate. Better food supply, plus medical advances, plus improvements in public hygiene made possible this decreasing of death rate. There were notable improvements such as better sewage, rubbish collection, better quality of drinking water, better working conditions. The birth rate was high, like in previous centuries, and the economic advantages of the Industrial Revolution made possible that people got married younger and then started having children earlier, and consequently, more people. The mechanization of the agricultural work made possible farming the land with less quantity of workers, so many peasants migrated to cities in search of work. The urban population in Europe was the 10% in 1800 and increased till the 40% in less than a century. It was the beginning of the urbanization of Europe. But this increasing population, was too high for the European cities. So plenty of these migrants had to leave the country, just to migrate to other countries and to other continents. Transport revolution played a key role in this process. 6 million people left Europe between 1800 and 1924. Up to 1870, most migrants were British and Northern Europeans. Between 1870 and 1924, many migrants were from Southern Europe, Spain, Italy, Greece, and Turkey. Main destiny was America, but Australia and New Zealand were usual too. Most of British and Irish people went to the United States, Australia, or New Zealand. Spaniards emigrated to Argentina. French people to Canada. United States was the country that received the majority of migration, 60% of European immigrants. The French Revolution altered the society, but it was actually during the Industrial Revolution where society was profoundly changed. From states determined by birth, now we will have social classes determined by wealth. Now we have three social classes: the upper class, the middle class, and the lower class. The upper class consisted of the aristocracy and high bourgeoisie. The middle class were formed by low bourgeoisie. That's tradesmen, shopkeepers, artisans, teachers, mid-level government officials, lawyers, army officers. And the lower class was formed by industrial and agricultural workers. Legally, they can move from one class to another one, but actually it wasn't so easy. Although there was legal and judicial equality, everybody was judged by the same laws and courts of justice, in practice, the economic inequality separated people depending on their wealth. And of course we are talking about male people. Women were completely subordinated to male, their fathers, brothers, husbands. The upper class, formed by the aristocracy and high bourgeoisie, shared certain characteristics. The aristocracy, or nobility, started paying taxes since the old regime system was abolished, but they held leading positions due to their wealth. They held property of large lands, as we know. The bourgeoisie is getting more and more power, because industrialists and bankers belong to this social group. They encourage a new mentality, the bourgeoisie values. These values consisted of hard work, savings, family life, and religion. Bourgeoisie people lived in comfortable homes in new neighborhoods on the outskirts of cities and enjoyed leisure activities following the aristocracy example. Concerts, opera, theater, horse racing. The middle class were owners of property, but they were less wealthy than the high bourgeoisie. They shared with the high bourgeoisie of the upper class the bourgeoisie values, because they considered work and savings as the key to acquiring wealth. This middle class supported reforms to be part of the political life. Lower class was the majority of population. Here we can find peasantry, house servants, and the proletariat. Peasants were a diverse group. There were owners of land, day laborers, and serfs. Owners of plots of land were usually in Northern and Western Europe, whereas day laborers who worked for owners of large lands were typical from south of Europe. In Eastern Europe, especially in the Russian Empire, existed serfs working under very hard conditions. Industrial workers were known as proletariat because their only wealth was their own labor. The term proletariat comes from the Latin word proletarius, and that means the one who doesn't have other properties than his children. Proletarians exchanged their labors for a salary. They performed low-skilled tasks and received low salaries. They used to be illiterate because children left school at a young age to start working and support their families. This lack of education made very difficult moving from one social class to another one. House servants had better living conditions than other members of the lower class because they lived in houses where they worked in. Nevertheless, they received low salaries, and they had only one afternoon off a week and worked more than 12 hours a day.